All right, so everybody hear me okay? Too loud, too soft? All right, I got a little something for us to watch to kick this off. Oh, we even get the volume on this one. So I was on LinkedIn the other day, and one of our former members who lived in town, Matt, or a friend of Matt's and I's, Brian Swagger, liked a video that a chief security officer put out there and said, "This is the day in the life of a chief security officer." I thought it'd be a good way, if we're going to talk about identity and your data, is if that was your data and your identity on top, the orange people is the internet. Everybody on the internet trying to get to your data. I thought it was a very good example. They don't give up. But I thought it was kind of fun. It made me laugh, and since it was had some connection, Brian, I think, used to present here also, and so that was kind of fun. So, going to be talking, about Azure B2C and then identity. But why is it important? Hopefully, if I'm supposed to not go past this yellow block. If so, I'm going to get some feedback. So, I'm going to try to dance around up here, but. We all know this. I'm just going to go quickly through a couple slides before we then get into some other stuff. But we all know we need to protect our users. We have to protect our data. The big thing out there is that we have to protect our company, their brand image, their reputation. All that has to do with protecting the data and identity. We've all heard of some of the, where identity has gotten, breached. Is a good word. We've all heard about some lawsuits about it. All of us has probably gotten a letter in the mail about signing up for identity protection from one of these. I mean, I received one from the last one where, I can sign up for, if I sign up this, I'll get a year free. One of the other things we all got to know is everybody's connected one way or another. There's users across the world who will all hit your website and are going to want to log in a whole bunch of different ways. And so why I chose to do this talk on the B2C, and I don't know if everybody knows that Azure has an identity B2C. My company is implementing a OAuth solution right now, but we're setting up a big server, but where can I get in my own playground? And also a place where, I don't know if you know, Microsoft solves a lot of problems that we actually run into before, and so we can actually find the answers from what they've done. So it has an OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. It's simple to use, and we'll go through that and how to use that. It integrates with all the other providers. I mean, and I have one already integrated that we'll see that with Google. They have a form of multi-factor authentication. They will call your phone. Have not played with that one, as there is an additional cost to that one. They really ping you pretty good on that one. And I myself want to mess around with some mobile apps. But if I have a mobile app, I'm probably going to be talking to some data somewhere. It might be my own server, might be someone else's, but I might have to know how to do an OAuth integration. And so I wanted to know how to do that. So they have a lot of examples for that. One nice thing that they do is, it's interesting, when you sign up, they do an email validation right away. So I thought that was kind of nice. They make you type in a security code. Interesting way of doing security. They have a built-in reset my password, edit profile. One thing that, I know where I work right now, we're going through a password hashing upgrade right now because our identity's kind of old and we're migrating it forward. But, by doing something up in the cloud, you don't have to worry about that anymore. All that stuff's going to be handled behind the scenes. If anything in Azure that you do, everything will be monitored, scalable. One thing that we'll see here on the B2C, I'm not a HTML pro, so you're going to see and I'm warning you right now, you're going to see a very bad login screen created by me, but it only has like 3 lines in it. That's about it. I'm not an HTML guy. One thing also, if you look at the Azure B2C, is that identity is something that most applications have to have. No one's going to probably hire you, buy your application for your identity management system. So you got to figure out, am I going to spend a lot of time on that, or am I going to spend a lot of time on my application. And so I didn't do that, but anyway, so that's why I like this too. So if I want to implement something on my own, I know I can just turnkey Azure B2C. So in my talk, I try to come up with a name for all my talks, and so I thought Know Thy User would be a good one for this one. So how do you know who they are? How do you authenticate? I'm going to go through some terms real quick. We're going to go through some Azure B2C walkthrough. All the stuff's already going to be built. There are examples that you can walk through on your own. Microsoft has a ton of them, but we have hopefully an hour. I know we started late, so I'm going to try to keep it to an hour. And then just talk about some of the NuGet packages you should be aware of, and then we'll go through some code examples. If everybody doesn't know, I'm Matt Huck. I've been coming to this for quite some time, a couple of years now. I know quite a few of you in the audience. Some of you worked at me with some of these, on some of these, but these are all the different places I've worked. This is kind of a standard slide I throw on all mine. But just to let you know, I'm a guy who's been, based on my gray hair, you can see I've done SQL Server 6.5 and up, and then all the way back to VB6. So one of the big things that everybody just wants to make sure of is there's always two things when you talk about logging in and an application is, you have authorization and you have authentication, the two A's. And sometimes, people call them auth-n and auth-z, but you're going to see that login is authenticating. Who are you? Are you who you say you are? And authorization is, do you have the rights to do stuff in this application? So those are two big things when you talk about identity that you really got to think about. And you're going to see in the code examples how Microsoft has it too. I mean, they talk about authorization. For what you do, we're going to build a simple little scope authorization in core, and then we're going to show when you log in, you're going to go do an auth-n. So for OAuth 2, if everybody hasn't seen this little diagram of how the workflow works, I mean, you're a user. That's the stick figure is you guys. You're going to want to use some sort of application. It could be anything out there. A mobile application, a website. Where I work, we're very big in website, and then we're just coming out with our mobile, and that's why we're having to upgrade. How do our mobile devices going to connect to the same web services that our website uses? And so we're going through an OAuth upgrade of our application. So anyways, you can log into an application, it's going to go over to a server to authenticate you. And that's what the Azure B2C is that's the server you're going to actually go over to, and you're going to see their login page. I can't remember which state I left it in. Either you're going to see my bad login, or you're going to see their good one, just so you will see that. But then you're going to get back in your application some sort of tokens, and we'll see that. And you're going to send those tokens on every request out to maybe a web API service to get data. And it's going to know everything about you, or figure out how to get that data about you. OpenConnect, or OpenID Connect, you'll see it abbreviated like that. That's the, Microsoft has theirs, their client, and that's the one we're going to use. But we're going to use that to talk to our OAuth server, which is the B2C. What we're going to see is we're going to get bearer tokens that we're going to send down the line. You're going to see that as a JSON object, so a JSON web token, you're going to see that. And then you're going to see also, you get an ID token in the app, and every time we want to call somewhere, we're going to ask for an access token. And there's security built into that in the specs. I'm not going to go through the specs and on how they secure that, but a lot of times you're talking about your signing. The token will be signed one way or another with the security, the security authority, which will be B2C. So in B2C, just a few terms. They have, they have an application ID, a GUID. I don't know if almost everything up in Azure is a GUID to identify itself one way or another. So we'll be using that. We have a redirect URL back to our application. Who's listening on our side? They have their extension of how they do a lot of their stuff is they call them policies. They have a sign up, sign in. They have those combined. They have them separate. They have a reset my password and then a edit my profile. You then also have identity providers that you can select. They have all the Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can just click on them. I don't have time probably tonight to go through how to set one up. I did one with Google. It takes you about 10 minutes to set that up. And all of a sudden now users can use their Google account to log into your application. Now I'm under the free trial with Google, so just be aware of that one. You have your attributes. So what do you want to capture about your users? They have a nice little way, and we'll show you that. MFA, styling. Styling is a big thing. Like in our application that we have a multi-tenant application, and we call it a lot of times white labeled our application, and then our partners can style it to their own look and feel. Well, how do you do that on a login page that's actually housed in Microsoft? And we're having that same problem when we're using Identity Server 4 when it's housed there. How do we customize it so our partners feel like they're still on the same website with their same branding and their same logos? And that's what I mean by styling. And scopes, that's just a nice little way of talking about what those resources are, and you're going to give it a name, and you're going to you can use that to access what resources on the site, and we're going to see one I built here. All right. So let's hopefully, I got to get logged back into my VPN. There we go. I'm going to have to. Since we lost that right before we started, got to get back in. And come on. All right. All right, so what we have here is when you create your own instance of your own Active Directory is basically what you're doing. Everything that powers the B2C is the same thing that they use a lot for the enterprise AD, is that you have to build one. The funny part about it, you got to go through it. There's a lot of good articles on it. It's interesting. I already have one built. I'm not going to build another one, but you create one, but then it actually isn't. You need to tie it to a resource group or a resource, and a resource group a lot of times is applied to a subscription. And the reason for that is they need to know who to bill. So what you end up with when you're done with creating your first one, you'll end up with multiple directories for you to log into. One of them is your B2C, and that's all that's in there. And your other one, and I'm just going to go over to the other tab, is my one that has all my resources. And it will come up here shortly. So that's one that, I hope it does. Sometime in the future. What was that? Yeah. That's not going to make the demo very friendly. All right, well, anyways, you would see in here my resource groups that will, let me see if I can just refresh this. It's just, no. No. Let's see if I can go into the B2C. What was that?
Are you connecting to your work network?
I have to. That's sometimes the benefit of security in a big company is they force that on it. They forced that on us a little bit ago, and however, it's working really good. I said I got enough bars. Maybe I set it over there, but Maybe if I can get back into the Wi-Fi here. Is it? Oops. Was it that one? Try connecting back into that one. It's trying to. Come on. Well, this is good. So I'm trying to get to the Azure B2C. So while we're doing that, maybe I'll flip over, since I can't get connected, I'll go ahead and do the code examples first. Or let me, I'll flip over while we're trying to get connected. And do the, do I have so many of them? All right, so I'll skip that, and I'll come back to that. So some of the packages that we need to be aware of for Microsoft.NET Core and the framework, if you haven't played around with it much, the way Microsoft is moving is everything is going to be along the, basically like the O1 pipeline in most of your projects. If you do that, life is really good for you in implementing their, any of the OpenConnect ID, interfacing either to Identity Server 4, if you implement that, or the Azure B2C. If you do that, everything's really well. I mean, if you're, like where I work, we have still some web forms. There's hooks for that. There's easy ways around it, but it can be done. But you should be aware now, if you're doing something new in Core, especially in 2.0, if you've done a new project, if you've noticed, you get everything right off the bat now, which is kind of nice. You don't have to remember every little NuGet package. And here's the ones that you need to be aware of for your application service. If you're, whatever you're doing for your web app, you'll just probably need to include the authentication and probably the JWT bearer. If you write your web API in order to secure it, you'll do the identity client, authentication again. For cookies, if you don't know, they use a lot of the times the cookies to make sure you'll have one for you and one for the Azure. So when you sign off, you're going to also get rid of the other cookie for Azure, so you know you're signed off in both places. The OpenConnect ID and authentication framework, you can see everything has O in it. If you do that, if you use that framework, if you add that into all your projects, you'll be, everything, life actually is pretty good. It's not difficult the other way, but I only went down this path. Let's see, how do I have this open twice? All right, so hopefully, let me see if I got back on the internet. And we're connected. Wow. All right, so we'll skip that part for now as I try to get back on the internet. Let me go through the code. So when you're building an application, I have one already built in Core. Like I was saying, when you do this now, you don't have to include as many of the libraries as you had to in the past. You get that almost all for free because everything's underneath this one. If you haven't, just a little tidbit, if you haven't played with Core quite any, one of the other nice little features is that if everybody remembers how maybe your packages config file got a lot of things in it. Every time you brought one thing in, it would bring everything else in. Whatever you bring in for NuGet now, that's the only thing that will show up in your project file now, so that's the only thing you have to remember is when you upgrade those. So like anything else in most of the services, you end up with startup. Everything that you need to do to configure, what you'll see out there, someone wrote a nice extension method out there to configure for the B2C. But you're basically going to just have your services where they do most of their dependency injection. One of the big things also for .NET Core 2.0 is they are making, I thought it was in one they were making dependency injection a first-class citizen, but they're moving everything. Even like in here, you're going to put all your configuration for like Azure and most of your other services going forward inside the services. So here you're going to set it up. If I'm just going to go over here to show what the extension method is doing, one of the big things, and if you can't see it, I can make it bigger, just let me know. You can see here it's adding it as a singleton, but to configure it, one of the things we said is we have a client ID, which is our application ID that we have up in Azure. We have the authority, which is you'll see what that is. It's a path to your instance. The other big key things is there's a bunch of events. When you get logged in, you're going to have to say, what do I want to do when I come back from the login event or change password event or on a failure, and they have quite a few events that once you go over to Azure B2C and you come back to your application, they're going to send you all these things if you want to handle them yourselves, and they're called events and you just override them. So whenever you do a redirect to the provider, or let's say you get authorization, someone's get logged in, it'll come down to this method. It will then show what this application does, and they always do is they go out there and try to acquire a token right away to make sure you're fully logged in. All right, let's see. It'd be nice to show something. All right, let me try to connect again. If that comes back. Because I can't run the application even. The other part that you need is the settings. As I said, your application ID, which is your client ID, a lot of times is just a GUID. When you create your AD, you have to give it a name. I gave it a great one, Matt Development AD. That's the one I'm going to log into. That's my tenant. You set up these policies, and I was hoping to show you these policies, hopefully I still will, is when I sign up or sign in, what I have configured for the screen to look like, what do I want it to prompt for, what are the identity providers it can use. When you do a reset password, what do I want to do during that? The same thing for when I want to edit my profile. The redirect URL, when I come back to mine, this one runs on this port. You have your client secret. That's when you create your application, you'll create a secret for it. I have an application out there on the web, one that I built, which we're going to build again today, but we'll see if we can up there on Azure, because I can show you, we're going to build, I built one yesterday, put it already out there in case, based on time, if we had time to do a publish. But you're going to see how fast it is to create these. For scopes, we're going to write a little API service that will do a, what else but Chuck Norris funny sayings or sayings about Chuck Norris. So we're going to write something and secure it, because there's one thing that you need to secure is anything about Chuck Norris. So let's see if I can get, if this came back, it's still trying to connect. All right. So since I can't run that, that's it. So one thing when you call an API, it's like this application is would come up, and I could probably run that part until it tries to log in. It won't have. But I'm going to want to. There, I can put in my code here. is working. See if any of you are going to come back now. All right, so we're not going to. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can run the app without it blowing up. We're on for a minute. All right, so, since I got Azure back, so just real quick. So here's my one normal account that all my subscriptions are assigned to. Here's the resources I've created. The Azure B2C is underneath, can't see it here. I call the AD Fund. And so what I have in there is I put the sample web service up there, but this is where I have my AD. You can see right there is my B2C tenant. Also, you'll want to create a storage account for anything that you do custom. You need to store your HTML files up there, so you'll end up running or creating a storage account. But this is where hopefully all the magic is underneath here. Yep. So we have our application. To create one, it's as easy as add. I'm just going to go through my core one. You get your application ID right off the bat. You say if you're going to be doing web API or web app. Everything I do is that return URL, you have to put it in here. For .NET Core, if you ever go on any of the Microsoft examples, they won't have the sign on or sign in OIDC. You need that. That took a day to figure that one out, to find the right Google question to find that one. So once you create that, you create your keys. You can have two of them. That's that secret I was talking about. Under here, you configure what you first create your scopes. So I have a Chuck for Chuck Norris, a scope for that. So we need that. That's the resource where we want to access. And then for the API access, we wanted to make sure when we come over here, we have included in all the resources that we want to make sure that this application has to it. I talked about identity providers. Here's where you can add in Google. You can add any of the other ones. You just have to have it set up on the other side first. So when you set up your Google one, you're going to basically get two fields, your application ID and your secret. You need to be able to put those in. And so any of the ones you want, Facebook, LinkedIn, Amazon, any of the ones you can use there. User attributes, these are things that you want to have. They have their built-in ones. And I've created two. Whether or not you like Disney, I'm a Disney guy, so I always like to find out who else, because then we can spend hours talking about it. Then I want to know what your favorite sport is, because I like golf, and if you like golf, we can talk for hours about that too. So I like to know who I have a lot in common with. So I created those. So you can create attributes that when you log in, will prompt for those fields. Those are part of your profile. User groups, if you need to do any manual work yourself on grouping of your own membership, you can go in here. Self-maintenance is obviously what you want to do, and that's why you have reset your password, let people reset their password and edit their own profile. And then, but here's the key of when you want to set up or sign in, how do you configure all that? So what will happen is you will come in here and you'll select, well, I'm going to let them sign up with their email account or Google. Of all those attributes that you've created, you're going to say, what do I want to prompt for? So whatever is prompted here will show up. We talk about claims a lot with tokens and what claims are in there, and you can pick what claims should be sent down to all your applications. You have a lot of settings in here for SSO. So you may have an application yourself, a website, multiple websites, and can that same login account work against all of them once you log into one tenant or one application? Can you use it and just automatically be in another? That's what they mean by a lot of their SSO, and you can set that up right down here if it's per tenant. So per my Matt Dev AD, once you're logged into that, you can go right into another app, or you can narrow it down to application. You can set up some of your own timeouts in here, but I pretty much left everything standard for this. Multi-factor authentication is just on or off. Here's where I talked about you have the ability to customize the screens. And so right now I have everything set for the default. If you do customize, you do need the URL. It's nice, that's where I said, if you have your own storage account where you store that in Azure, that's where it's very easy to pull from. The default sign-up page, when you come in here, here's all the attributes. You can move these around. So if you want to say, hey, I want to know, make you like Disney first, make that to the top. It's very easy. So how will the screen layout be? Okay, I'm not going to save that. You can set up different rules for when you sign up for a social account if you're going to capture different stuff there. And default error page. I'm just going to leave everything default right now. This came out, I think, since I started playing with this, when I saw this show up a little bit ago, a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. They're actually adding in the multi-language customization also in there. So this is what you go through and you set up how you want all that to work for sign up or sign in. I'm not going to. They do allow you to run it right now. If you look at it, it has that Matt AD in there. And that is, if you look at what you can run it right now, and this is what the login page will look like. It's one of the standard Microsoft ones. So let me go back just to the other one out there for edit profiling. You can do that also. Same type of screen. You can have multiples of them because you can have different applications. You can create new ones. Then when you want to use them, you can put them into your applications. Same type of thing. You just go through here, set up your providers, all that, and then your, customization. You can do all the same stuff for each one. And so you got pretty much, just for a quick overview, you have your policies for when you sign in, sign up, when you edit your profile, reset your password. You can come up with different ones for sign in and sign up, or you can have a combined one since you do a lot of that at the same time. So that's pretty much, once you have that set up, you're ready to go. As long as you, hopefully, you write down your application ID and your key. If you mess up your key, just delete it. You're allowed 2 of them, just delete it, create another one. I did that. So if we go back to our application setting here, you can see I just paste them in. My tenant, the names. You'll notice when you create your names, Microsoft automatically appends the B2C_1 onto it. You don't have a choice about that. It's not like a naming standard that I came up with, so you might have thought, oh, that's pretty smart, but Microsoft appended it onto every one of my dev ones. All right, so just to make sure my account is that, you can see here, I have just a simple, the standard .NET Core application here, just MVC one, and now it has a sign-in page that when you click sign on or sign in, it will hopefully, I'm not sure I had, you may have to, oh, I have breakpoints, that's why, to show you what it's doing. So as I said, when we set it up, we said, some of the events we want to do, some things we need to do is just a little bit more. We want to make sure we have the option for our default policy in here for when we do our sign up. There's just some scope and some other things I put in here. or that you need to set. But let me just let that run. But we go right here. We have our Google login page. I said I want a Google. I want an email account. If you want to go ahead and sign up. Here we see all the fields that we asked for. We have likes Disney. I don't know if you can see that down there. We have your favorite sport, which you can turn these into either radio buttons, text boxes, numeric. You can have drop-down boxes. Those are all just part of the customization, so it's very easy. So if you have so everything on the screen you can make look and feel like your own application. And so your users, unless they look up there in the login URL, they won't know they're on the Microsoft site. If you use any of the other ones, if we go over here and cancel, and let me go back. If I click Google, you'll see we'll go over and see probably if everybody has a Google account, the same one you've seen before. So that's all built in. I'm gonna go ahead and kill this one, or go back. So let me go ahead and get logged into my account. But what we want to do here is, so that would be your application. So once you get logged in, I should get logged in, shouldn't I? Before I talk about creating an application. Gets logged in, it comes back to when I get received. If you want to see what's all in the principal here, let's see, for claims, we can see all the claims I asked for. And then, whoops, the user ID, everything is where's my object ID? Oh, so our object identifier for Microsoft, no matter what you are, you're a GUID. So that's who you are to them. And so everything going forward, that's who I am. So this will go ahead and do a test to make sure it goes out there and create a token. And I should be logged in. So from now on, I'm logged in. If I go to Hello Matt Huck, it actually will want to go, and this one's wired up to edit my profile. So on my profile page, all I want to do is I can have different fields than what is in the login page or when you set up your account. So customizable that way. I'm going to go ahead and cancel. So what we want to do is, what do you want to do is now call an API. And let's go ahead and build that code real quick. So I might cut and paste a lot in, but just to prove that I'm not going to pull any fancy demo tricks. We'll try to go ahead and create we'll call this Chuck 1. So this API now, granted, it's just going to be a standard web API. And we're going to see how long it takes to bring down all the NuGet packages for that. So what I will do is I have all this, I'll bring that over here. So through the magic of stuff, I'll know what to do. Okay, so first thing we'll do is, since we know we need we'll add in our NuGet packages. I always do that. So we need the authentication one. We'll install that. bearer token. All right, so we need those two to talk to our service or our identity provider. So in the startup, we need to add a few things. We got to initialize that. So once again, I said everything is in the, most of our configuration will be in this config services. And for time's sake, because I know we started late, wow. Let me just cut and paste that in. Oops, I thought I had two of them here. One with the fancy stuff in it, one without. Yeah. I guess not. I did not save that. So thank God Sharper's there. And I'm going to comment these out to start with. We'll build those in a second. So the first thing is our authorization. Where is it? We're going to put a lot of stuff in our configuration again, and I'll do that in a second. That's where we'll build our string here of who we are. You're going to see the mat. We need to put our tenant and then our policy that we're going to hit. We're just going to be doing tokens, bearer tokens, and we then have to also say what our audience is here. So if authentication failed, I have the code for that. It's just so I get a nice screen whenever that happens in these demos. Let me just put that code there. So that's the only thing I care about just for this demo. If there's more events that you want to, you can subscribe to those and write methods for each one of them. But as you know, as you play around with stuff, you get a lot of failures and you like to see what the error message is. So I always include that one now that I do that. So this is all we need to talk to that. We need to then tell the then you go through and configure your application. It needs to use we go right. Use authentication. If you go between 1.1 of their libraries and like 2.0, you'll see everything that I did up in services is now down in the app. When you configure your app, they've reversed it. Now you just say, hey, I'm going to use it. And then it uses what you configured up here when you add authentication. Okay, let me go to my config file. So just a simple config change to add in everything that we just created. Once again, the tenant, the client, the policy. So what happens is when it gets configured up, you'll see it seems sometimes I think there's quite a bit of delay sometimes when it starts up these services, but it's doing a lot of discovery out there. One of the things it's hitting, if everybody hasn't seen, I meant to bring this up, that in behind the scenes, we'll go out here. Wow, that's easy to read. We'll hit the, it's always a well-known endpoint. You'll go out there and find everything about it. Where do I need to do for authorization for ending of the session? All this stuff is pretty standard for the OAuth 2. So all this is, your Open Connect ID is going out there and getting all this, caching a lot of this stuff so it knows how to interface with your authentication provider. So we're building Chuck. So the last thing we need to do is create a controller. I may just, well, let's go ahead and create one. And I'm gonna, while that's doing that, I'll get the code for it. It's, all right. So the only thing we're going to do in here is I'm just going to get rid of this method and or add a method. That's what I'm going to do. So, you know, in order to talk to another API, we got to create a HTTP client. We got to give it its endpoint. So this is, if you want to know, this is a nice little URL to get jokes about Chuck Norris. We're going to send it off and put the response on the screen. Oh, that's right, I got to put, okay. That's right, no, that should work because he just returns it. All right, so right now, if we were to run this, gotta find out, compiles okay, didn't make any mistakes. One thing I always do is, since I didn't get rid of the values yet, let's not have it launch a browser, but I do need to know what its URL is. So let's run that. Let's bring up Postman. Really? What is that? I have not seen that one. Is that? Start it. Should be. Okay, let me see if the one I already have built will run. See if that's something to do with logging in. So this one runs without a window, and I need to know what it's. This one is secured. I put the authorized tag on it, so since this one runs, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. I think it's where I built that one at. And what we'll see here, that was the next step we were going to do, just authorize it. And this is that port right there. And if anything comes up that might offend you, I apologize already for it. So if we hit the endpoint, we send, we should get something that comes out that says what Chuck Norris does. So Ozzy Osbourne bites the heads off bats, Chuck Norris bites the heads off Siberian tigers. So that we have built. So that's how, you know, a simple little API. If we go ahead and stop this and put the authorized tag on it now, because we haven't authorized, done anything but, so we can uncomment that. Now you have to be authorized to get to it. You have to have a bearer token for that. So if we come out here and do the same thing, we should get a 401 unauthorized. So that API that we just built is being secured and backed now by my AD, the B2C one that I just created. Or I created and we have the policies for, and we just created a web API. So it's that easy. So now we make sure that you have to be authenticated. There are different things you can do now also. What I like is what they've done for authorization, where you can add policies, or what they call policies. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this Chuck one. Oh, geez, I got all that code for that. Oh, maybe I won't. Let me, because I'm running well late. I'll bring up this one that already has it all in there. What's nice is that when you add your authorization in the same services, when you configure, so when you add your authentication, now you're going to say what rights do you need to access different resources. And you can do one as simple as, hey, they have to have a required claim city. If you remember when we had the page, one of the prompts is I asked for what city you're in. You can say, hey, they have to be a web API user, and that will make sure they have a claim type city. If you want to do a scope one, which is kind of neat, and it shows a little bit more advanced features. Of course, it opened up on this screen. What you have to do is wait for your Visual Studio to catch up with you. But I have this policy called Scope Chuck. And when you do that, you have to create a new class for your scope requirements. Say, hey, it's got to have the scope element, and the scope element is just defined up here as in your claim, it will have that name. But it can be anything. If you look at the examples online, they do this over 21. They get their birthday to make sure if you hit certain sites, you have to be over 21 for it. But I wanted to be more fun. We'll do a Chuck. So in here, it just says when you configure it, what's the element and what's the scope? So if you're going to do one off your birth date or something, other application, these are the variables. This is setting it up. Then you have to write a handler for it. And so when it gets the authorization handle, when it runs across it, it's going to go and find out, like in this scenario, it's going to go check and find, is there a scope out there? And if so, it's going to say successful. If not, it won't, and you won't be able to access it. So if you don't have, in this case, the scope requirement is passed in when you configure it in your startup. So this one says, hey, the element Chuck has to be one of the claims as scope coming in. And ahead in the other example is you can do it off of anything that you have there. Anything that you want to build a, so like this one did, hey, you want to build it off of, it has to have the required claim Omaha. So when you want to put it into your controller, it's as simple. It's saying, hey, it's authorized, and you've got to have the policy scope Chuck. And that one is a custom one that we built. And it's as simple as, and it will go and look and say, hey, for that token, is that in there? So let's go ahead and let's, this guy is going to, that's running, is one of the things that we want to do is when he does do a call out, let me set a breakpoint here. So this one's going to go ahead and call out to, I think the API I have up in Azure that's waiting to make sure you're authorized. And it's going to go out there. What you're going to do is it's going to, a lot of the stuff it does is sometimes you got to figure out if you're going to cache the token. Microsoft has their token cache. This little library here that they have in almost all their demos, which I just grabbed, they talk about building your own if you're going to have a distributed network or a distributed application where you're running on multiple servers. You're going to have to make sure every server has access to all the tokens. And so you're going to have to build that out because right now this is just basically in memory on this one. So it goes and gets your token, user token, and then it is going to acquire a access token based on the authority and the scope that I want. So I'm going to ask for a Chuck scope. If you didn't define in Azure, when we set up our application, we set up all our scopes. We have to have one of those defined. So, you got to know about what's available. So you can have as simple things as maybe admin rights, read rights. I have one as simple as Chuck. And then you make sure that the API, you can make sure which ones are going to be accessed through this API. Because your application, you may want to have different services of your own utilizing it, the same application profile setup. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get one. When we get done here, we should hopefully end up with a bearer token. So hopefully we'll see that, and then it will send it off and be authenticated. Let's just go right. So if I click my API, that's where I have it. Come on. Wake up again. There we are. We're going to see our signed on user. That's that GUID that we are. That's who we are, really. That's our user ID. It's going to go out to the cache, get our user token if we look at that. It's user token cache. It gets a lot of the information that it has in the token cache of Microsoft. This is a Microsoft authentication library. That's what MSAL, you'll see that a lot in all their examples. But let's just go out there. And after we get down here, it's going to go out and acquire a token. When we're down here, now we have an access token. If we were to go ahead and copy that, and look at that. Oh, great. Got the ... I want to use that one. Okay, get rid of the quote. So right there, that's what it looks like. It's encrypted. You can't really do much with this one. This will be passed on the wire. If we want, we can go into here. I have the one up in Azure already. That's listening right there. And if I try to send to it right now, it should get unauthorized. In my header, I'm going to add I finally got rid of that quote. I didn't cut and paste it again. All right. That's easier now. I did that before. All right, we're going to have that. It's going to fight me. I should be able to. I can send with that one. I can capture it from the application itself, and it's going to do the same thing. Now I'm secured. So that's what you want your application to do in order to call your secure API. Is you can go ahead and grab that. That's not something you want to write out to any log files or anything like that. But for demonstration purposes, it works out really good. Localhost is not responding. Let's go here. It's not responding. Okay, that's always good. so that hung up. This time we'll do it again, but this time we won't wait forever on it. That was just show you what it's trying to grab. Let's pass it along. And now we're authorized and we can get the information. So that's how, I mean, you can secure your application rather quickly. The examples here that Microsoft does a lot of work for you to get all that information, but this is pretty much what you have to do. I'm going to show you a quick framework one. In framework. Wow. You'll see in this one, this is using the older libraries. It's doing everything in the app. It's not much doing much in the services, but you'll see a lot of the same information. It's going out to the metadata, using that well-known form thing and getting all the information. It does all the same information on redirect, but you'll see you do it all in the app setup inside of the startup. But you'll see you have this example that they had out there, which I kind of modified a little bit, updated it to some of the newer NuGet packages, did not go to 2.0. That became a little bit frustrating as I was learning about the differences between 1.1 and 2.0 of their authentication library. Other than that, everything is the same. Once you're up and running, I mean, your controllers in your API, it's the same. If you have an API that you want to secure, startup is pretty much the same. You add in the OAuth bearer token with its options. Basically, it's just a whole bunch. You configure the endpoint, and now you're configured. And then you just start doing, you can authorize your thing, and you have to be authorized for it. So there's not much difference between the framework and the core, but if you do Owen, everything works a lot better, a lot easier. You'll see a lot more examples out there. Everything, if you've noticed, when you go through some examples, as they've done, time has gone by and they've gone from 1.1 to 2.0, the amount of code that you have to write has gone from like 30 lines down to 10 lines, with each from like 1.1 to 2.0. And that's kind of nice. They're doing a lot more work for you in the configuration. But I wanted to show, that's pretty much a lot what I have, but what I wanted to show was, if you have a sandbox like Azure, like we all have, hopefully all of us through our employers have accounts where we have credits, you can easily set one up, work through those examples, and you can start learning all these new tools and new technologies like OAuth. Like I want to learn that. How do I incorporate, and then my next thing is, how do I put that into an iOS device? How do I do that on an Android device so I can authenticate maybe an application I want to write and maybe someday sell? Because that's what we like to do, is try to be adventurous and create new things. Are there any questions anybody has on any of that? It was kind of quick, kind of whirlwind.
So now on the
On what?
on your API side.
Yes.
When it's, does it talk back to the identity service, or is all the information coming in that token that you acquire and send along?
So the question there is, when your API, does it talk back to the identity service? And the question to that is, in the B2C one, most of the information is coming through. With other servers, you can configure it to do authorization code, I think is the grant type. And you have to, when you set up your client for, and I actually wanted to try that. I do know for Android you have to do that, because I was working on that in the office on Monday. You have to code it that way, because an Android will go back every single time with that token and bring back the whole thing. And that would be up to, but it's a type of grant type to do that. So when you set up the B2C has what they call the back channel. And so it will always go back. And so if you revoke privileges right away, if you always utilize the back channel, you're going to lose it right away. You'll get an error message, your user will right away, if you remove access. Then the rest of it is how long is that time period for that access token. A lot of times they try to make sure an access token, since you're going to ask for it a lot, is to make them very short-lived. And that way, you don't make those last forever, because then you can revoke privileges, but they have that token. So that one token I had there, probably about 5 minutes from now, I shouldn't be able to access it again. Any other questions?
I will also work with like say I have a Java backend, like a Java API or libraries.
Yeah, so you're talking like if you, any of the JavaScript library type ones, or just even Java itself?
Or if you have some old app,
A desktop app?
say a mobile web app.
Yeah, I mean, it does. The examples there are a little bit, it doesn't, I know in our example, we have a web API that is, was token-based or a cookie-based security. So it was doing everything out of the cookie. The developer on that brought in had to upgrade and bring in the Owen on that, because that older one. Once he did that, there was only one other thing in the configuration part of it that he had to just uncomment one line. Now the web forms part worked and the MVC part worked. So I mean, there was just, you know, but you have to, it took him, I think, a day and a half to discover that. So as he said, once he got it working, he redid it and pared down everything, and he says, you're gonna be amazed. It was 5 lines, but it took me a day and a half to figure those 5 lines out. If you do with the standard, especially if you do any new code, you know, greenfield coding is always nice, isn't it? But those examples, will work right out of the box. But there's enough examples out there for, OAuth 2.0 and either some sort of Open Connect provider out there. So you should be able to put it in, because we're putting it in our web forms. We have an old app that's web form MVC, and we're now throwing in a Angular part on top of that also. And that's why we need our Angular one that's gonna be all client-based, needs a token. And then we also have, well, it didn't need it, but our mobile devices need it for sure. And so as you have all these different clients accessing your same resources, how are you gonna secure them all? Because that was what, you can't just be passing around username, password on everything. Any other questions? All right. That's all I have for you today. Hopefully, sorry about the late start and the internet problems, but it looks like we finally got them all working here at the end. But I just suggest, what I told our team, if you look at what Microsoft does on some of the products, like the Azure B2C, all the problems that we're having standing up our own identity server, they've already solved. So sometimes those examples, actually, that's what they're using now. A lot of times I go back to the Microsoft, what they're using for B2C or their AD integration, and trying to figure out, well, that's how they did it. Maybe we should do the, that's the same lines of code. So I always say, take a look if the problem you're solving is up in Azure already, maybe, and there's already code samples for that too out there. So I would leverage it, especially everybody who has credits of $150 a month. What a great way to learn. All right.